Hey everyone, Aaron here from Ultra RC Hobbies. We've had a lot of good positive feedback about our tech tips and some of the videos we've been doing in the past regarding that. And we've had a couple of requests about tools. What tools do I need to work on my RC? The thing I can see a lot of people struggling with and why most people don't want to do maintenance, I find, is because they don't have the right tools. So today we're gonna walk through what we think is kind of the most important things for anybody to get into RC and what tools they'll need to maintain any sort of vehicle. I also did bring my personal tool bag here to walk you through things that I take when we travel to BC to go racing or just normal wrenching sessions. So first things first, let's just pack out what we got going on here and let's talk about some options and the basic tools that you'll need. And then we'll get really in depth on some of the cool extra stuff that you can get. So number one thing that we're gonna need for this hobby industry, all hobby grade RCs are going to use hex hardware. So hex hardware is going to be very, very beneficial to get a nice set of tools to take it out. Every manufacturer normally is going to include Allen keys. Allen keys are phenomenal for super tight spaces, for just little odds and ends. Are they great if you're gonna be taking apart, say, a brand new Mustang drift car? Probably not. Your fingers are gonna hurt, you're gonna hate the experience, it's gonna take you 8 to 10 times longer to actually pull anything off than what it's really necessary. There is a ton of different hex tools that you can buy. Say for example, something like what we got here on our on-point set. It's gonna include your 1.5, 2 and 2.5. That is going to fix 95% of the RC vehicles. If say you have something bigger, like 5th scale, anything like that, the 3 mil might be necessary, but in most cases it's really not. So 1.5 to 2.5. What are the things that we look for when choosing a tool? Things that we look for are a couple things. So tip. What I mean by the tip is going to be what material is it made of? Is it cast or ground to fit? And what is that gonna mean for you? So if you have something casted a million times, the million and first time, it's definitely not gonna have the same, essentially just fit that it would have on the first time it was cast. So we always recommend something with a hardened tip and something that is ground to fit because it will fit your screws a little bit better. The one thing that we now get into secondary to that is handle type. Say for example, these on points are gonna have this little grub screw and you can actually pull the tip out if you break it. Or say for example, you have a lot of pesky 2 mil screws that you really can't get a normal driver into. There also is the availability from ProTech and other manufacturers to have the ability of pulling that tip out and putting a ball driver in there so you can get a little bit more angle on your screw and you don't have as much issue stripping out heads. So there's a couple different versions. You have companies like MIP, which are like old school style plastic handles. These are really good if you have a little bit bigger hands, and they also have the ability of being a little bit longer of a tip to get in there a little bit deeper. Downside with say like an MIP is you cannot replace the tip. You do have to replace the whole driver. So definitely things like that make a big difference in how you choose your tools. But something like this, just as an upgrade, you're $24 for a toolkit like that. So, I mean, there is very, very basic things that you can use to really make your experience better. Second option for that is going to be something like a nut driver. So what a nut driver is gonna do is take your wheel nuts off your truck so you can get to bearings, you can do maintenance, you can do all of the other things to make just life easier. There's usually gonna be a couple standard sizes. So if you're working with any 3 mil hardware, 3 mil nuts, it's gonna be a 5.5 millimeter nut driver. If you're working on wheel nuts for majority of all the 10 scale vehicles, it will be a 4 mil nut, which is a 7 mil nut driver. And if you're working on something in like 5 mil nut, that's gonna be 8 mil. And then the next common one up is something like this, which is a 17 mil. So X-Max, 8 scale buggy, truggy, all the ARMA stuff, all gonna be that 17. Again, a whole bunch of different ways that you can buy that. You can buy things from ProTech, which are gonna be singular tools. You can buy things that are gonna have a set in it, like say something like this from MIP, which is a 5.5 or a 7 mil. You're gonna be able to get all of this different ways. So depending on what you're working on, say you really don't think you need a 17 mil, I probably wouldn't buy it. If you don't really think you need a 5.5, don't buy it, just buy the 7. But the biggest difference between all of these tools that we just talked about nut driver wise versus say using a 1/4 inch drive socket or something like that is going to be the thickness of the wall. And what I mean by that is most of these wheels have a very, very small clearance. So if you look at how small the wall is from the inside to the outside diameter, it's going to be able to get into a lot of places easier, especially if you have a high offset wheel and that wheel nut is really buried inside of the actual wheel itself. So it definitely helps a lot that way. A couple other things that I think are super necessary for your basic beginners are going to be a pair of good needle nose pliers, something to get diff pins out, axle pins, stuff like that. Very, very handy. Multiple different ways. You can do regular pliers, channel locks, things like that. But needle nose usually is the first thing that we grab. And option number 2 is one of these digital calipers. You can pick these up anywhere. I know Princess Auto and a whole bunch of other places have them for relatively cheap. But when you look at every single exploded view, and if they don't have a screw, essentially diameter checker or a 1-to-1 screw chart, you say, okay, well, what's a 3x14 look like? What does a 3x17 look like? Anything like that, grab your digital calipers and you can 100% reference the correct length of hardware. This goes a long way, especially building kits and stuff like that, doing shock shaft measurements for your down travel, doing things like droop, doing things for rod ends, all of that stuff. Digital calipers is kind of a must when you get a little bit deeper in there. And then let's talk about something to hold all your tools. So say something like this tool from ProTech. This is just a nice tool bag. It's going to be very similar to the Huddy one we have here. It's going to have all of your nice odds and ends for, you know, all the elastics and things like that. So super, super handy. I think that's a very good kind of setup. So things that are a little bit more in depth now, once you get a little bit farther into just more than basic, you know, RC maintenance, let's talk about doing your own body. So when you do bodies in this industry, most of the time they're not pre-cut or pre-drilled. So a good set of Lexan scissors, something sharp. I usually prefer the curved ones. In most cases, we sell hobby details kits that come with 2 sets of scissors. So you get a straight and a curved. I usually go for the curved ones. I just like carrying 1 set of scissors with me all the time. And another thing these are super handy for is going to be cutting bags open. So when you buy all of these parts, they come in bags. Second thing is going to be a body reamer. Again, we sell these from Hobby Details, ProTech, Huddy, a ton of different options. Most of the time they will have a chart on them to tell you the diameter of hole you're drilling. The one big advantage though of using a body reamer versus a drill is going to be the body reamer is going to give you a perfectly round hole. A drill usually triangulates the hole like a bit. It doesn't actually drill a perfectly round hole in Lexan. So these are a lifesaver once you start wanting to do custom bodies. So getting into some of the stuff specifically, say for a Traxxas model, some of the Traxxases are going to use a Phillips. So say your basic Stampede, Rustler, Bandit, they all use Phillips. So having a decent Phillips, something with not so pointy of a tip. Normally we would get into like the JIS tools that are a little bit more flat and not so deep, so you get to the end. So that's definitely going to be one big one. Item number 2 is going to be a flat blade, prying something off, wheel hexes, you know, just your normal flat blade things. And the other 2 things that are going to be really weird, I'm going to probably get a lot of people wondering like, hey, you're not a dentist, why do you have this? A pick. So you can use a pick, pointed dart, like if you have any playing darts, you can point the tips. These are amazing if you have something that you get really dirty. Shock bolts, especially on the front end of most bashers or back end, any chassis screws on any of the 8-scale stuff, you can use these picks to essentially go on the bottom side of the car, put them in the head of the screw, and then you can dig all of the dirt and debris out of the screw, which then A is gonna give you a longer lasting hardware on your car, but B, also not wreck your tools as quickly. So something like this pick is amazing. You can also use like a hobby knife or something like that, but normally you just bust the tip off of them and they're no good. So a hobby knife is always a good second option. The next thing up is going to be a set of shock shaft pliers. So these are ones from Techno. I've had these forever. They're amazing because they will hold the shock shaft, and with this being an aluminum tool, It's not going to score or scuff the shock shaft, so you're not going to have worries about, killing the O-rings inside of them or doing anything like that with breaking them. These also have a nice handy tool with this little pin right here. And what that's amazing for is popping in and out the hollow ball off of a rod end. So these are absolutely phenomenal. And lastly, on like a basic toolkit, just a little brush. This is just like a basic toothbrush from the dollar store. You can buy packs of them, and they are amazing for cleaning, say CVs or anything on your car. So these are kind of one big option. You can get other paintbrushes and stuff like that that can get into be a little bit more of a broad style, but that's for sure the basics that I would recommend. Now, getting into, say, something a little bit more in-depth, if you want to get into racing, if you want to do more of that kind of stuff there, I have a couple specialty tools in here that really make life a lot easier. So first things up are going to be these tools right here. So this is what we call an arm reamer. So what we would do is if you got a new set of arms and you put the hinge pin and drop the hinge pin through the arm, you've probably seen that in some of our build videos, and the hinge pin gets stuck, it doesn't really seem like that hole is perfectly 100% straight. You can use this arm reamer, go in and out of the hinge pin hole a couple times, and then just kind of open it up to make sure that the mold wasn't kind of a little bit crooked or anything like that. So these are amazing tools for that. If you have an 8-scale buggy that uses a 4mm pin or anything like that, you can use a 5/32 chainsaw file, which we've done in the past, chuck it in a drill and just spin it up that way. Phenomenal, absolutely amazing. Next option is going to be some of these aluminum nut drivers. So these guys here. So I have a 7mm, and I also have this one, which is a 5 and a 5.5. What we use these ones for is if you start changing your hardware, you want to go a little bit more lightweight, something up top, especially shocks, things like that, mounting them, we use aluminum nuts. So instead of using a normal standard steel nut driver, we would use the aluminum ones just to essentially help you out with not hurting any of your aluminum components. So that's why we've got a couple of those. Other things that we start getting into specialty, you see I'll have 2 sets of tools. So I have the MIPs, and then I also have the Hobbies. The Hobbies I've had since since 2007 when I started RC. I bought a good set of tools, and they've lasted till 2024. So tools, in my opinion, are something that you don't cheap out on. You buy it once, you cry once, and you're done. You never have to worry, and you can just always expand. Other things that I have in my toolbox, like I was saying about the ball drivers. So this is a 2mm ball driver. So if we look at that and look at that versus a standard flat, you'll see this has a mill in it. So it's big on the end, and then it mills down, and then it's standard where this is straight all the way through. Like I said, this is awesome for if you want to get somewhere where you need a higher angle. So look at how far you can actually move this driver before it pops out. A normal flat, you cannot do that. So ball drivers are a huge, huge, huge thing to just making your life a little bit easier when you get a little bit farther into the hobby and you want to start getting, a little bit more in depth on doing your maintenance and things like that. One other kind of specialty tool I'll have in my tool bag all the time is one of these guys. This is the oddball out in my tool bag. I've never updated it. I've had it forever. But this is a 1/16 driver. So if you ever have any pinions, anything like that, are stubborn, and your 1.5 just starts to strip out a little bit, the 1/16 is marginally bigger than 1.5mm, so it grabs that hex grub screw way better, and it will make your life so much easier for getting those stubborn grub screws out. And then the minute they're stripped and you need to start using 1/16, wouldn't be a bad idea to start using, thinking in the back of your mind, okay, let's change some hardware out. Let's not continue down this path. If you strip it out, you're kind of hooped at the racetrack. So there's a couple other things that we can talk about that I'll go grab from the back, and I'll be right back. These are the last couple things that I'll say make life in RC way easier. Getting a 1/4-inch driver, say something like this Milwaukee, Makita has one, DeWalt has one. There's a whole bunch of different brands. The one thing I do recommend is something with a clutch. Most of the time, all the hardware in RC does not require a lot of torque because it's always going into plastic or getting captured by a nut or going into aluminum. So you can really strip out the screw or whatever you're screwing into really, really quickly. We use all the Milwaukee ones. The nice part with Milwaukee is we have a whole bunch of other tools that uses the M12 battery, so it just works up in our lineup that we use these. You can buy all these tips. MIP sells them, ProTech sells them. There's a ton of companies that sell them. I always look for a tip though that has this little groove in it, and what that does is when you put it in your driver, it just locks it and it doesn't fall out. There's a whole bunch of companies that were making flat ones that didn't lock, and it kind of sucked because your actual tip gets stuck in the screw. Other thing that's really, really handy, and these are like dire need moments, a Dremel or a rotary tool of some sort with a cutoff disc or a polisher, doing anything like that, these are really, really handy. I know when I got my stuff, I have a Milwaukee driver like this, and Milwaukee also does a rotary tool that's M12 powered. So absolutely amazing. Couple batteries, that's what we took to Chilliwack, and polishing shock shafts or doing hinge pins, or Dad had to use it to make a servo plate. Things like that, having a cutoff wheel with a rotary tool is amazing. And last thing up is going to be a pencil. So this has multiple use. Obviously, you can use it as an actual writing device and stuff like that. But if you're into 8-scale racing, especially if you have a pillow ball car like an X-Ray, an Associated, an S-Works, any of those that use pillow balls, even the Revos and the T-Maxes, these are awesome. So what we use this for is, since all pencils aren't lead anymore, they're graphite, and they're going to be a dry graphite is what we're going to be using this for. Instead of carrying an aerosol can of dry graphite, you actually draw on the inside of the pillow ball cup that meets the face of the steel pivot ball. We actually draw on the inside of that, fill it all the way in, and it's going to give you essentially a layer of lubrication between the face of the ball and that plastic housing. This is something that Ty Tessman taught us when he was here for the 110% clinic. It was an absolutely phenomenal idea, and it's super, super easy to carry around, and you never know when you need to fill out a form or you have a setup sheet that you need to make changes on. So pencil, that's the last thing. So hopefully everyone enjoyed this video. Please throw a comment down below if you want us to continue these videos of talking about maybe how to store your parts, how to organize your parts, things like that. We have a whole bunch of ideas of new kind of videos coming out. So throw them down in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, throw a sub if you haven't already to follow us for future videos coming in the future. So thank you so much for watching. We really do appreciate it, and we'll catch you in the next one. Bye.